You know, ladies and gentlemen, I'd really like to welcome you to this evening's Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon. It's on every Thursday between 7 and 8. And tonight I'm going to look at a subject that many of you have asked me about time after time after time. How can you actually see a ghost for yourself? Well, way back in the 1980s, towards the latter part of the 1980s, we made a decision that we would, excuse me, that we would make write a book that would make it very easy for you. But not only would that be a book about ghosts, it would be a book that would tell you how you could use different, very simple tricks and very simple ways of searching out how you might be able to see a ghost for yourself. And it was called Ghosts of the Midlands and How to Detect Them. I know a few of you might have had a copy of this book. I really don't know if I hold it up in front of you. Can't see me then, can you? Unfortunately, but there you go. And what did we do? We just printed a couple of thousand on a dot matrix printer. And the strange thing is that we sold the lot, sold them all in a few weeks, because people really had a need to get hold of a little book that made the subject of ghost hunting simple and told. I do apologise. I'm very itchy nose tonight. That's a sign of money coming, isn't it? Have some of you perhaps sending me some money. But we decided that we would write a book where not only would you be able to have a very good chance of going to where ghosts have really genuinely been seen, but how you could make little sort of tests using very simple things like chalk, pieces of string. Also, I'm not going to go into details because I know a lot of you got that book, and if you haven't, sometimes you will occasionally see it for sale. Ghosts of the Midlands and How to Detect Them by me, Philip Solomon. It was actually printed in 1990, but it's very, very expensive. You know, people who've got a copy of it tend to hang on to it. But we did it. We printed it, we published it, and it sold out. So we printed it again, another couple of thousand, and it sold again. And on really until at the end we just thought, well, time we were moving on to something else. But it's a very useful book, and it was one of those simple books. I mean, the advice I would give you about hoping to see a ghost is this. So many of you go on these sort of specialist ghost areas, don't you, where you go on evenings, anything from £25 to £75, and you spend the night in a haunted house, and you have so-called experts teaching you how to use equipment and try to see a ghost or something of that nature. Well, I'll tell you something. One thing you don't want to be doing, what you don't want to be doing is, having somebody on there who sort of telling you all the things to paint the scene of what you might create a way of seeing a ghost. You want to just let it come naturally. And don't be one of these people if you hear a door creak or you hear a little knock or something, screaming. We've all heard that lady and ladies having, at a little, at a door opening or closing or a drop of I don't know, a drop of a pencil or something. That's not ghosts. And really, what you're going to do, really, if there is anything there, you're probably going to frighten them off, aren't you? Of course, we're talking about spirits really more than ghosts in that way, and they're very different things. A ghost, it appears over and over again in the same place, same time, year in, year out. And it's just a replay, in my view, of the ether. But it's fascinatingly interesting. But if you do happen to see one, it's not good screaming at it, is it? Or if you have someone there who tells you that there's something there, you know, screaming or panicking, that's what you've gone for, isn't it? That's what you've gone to investigate. And that's what everybody really wants to have happen, isn't it? If you go on one of these evenings, you pay all that money, really, you're really hoping that you will see a ghost clearly for yourself. I wonder how many of you actually have, and how many of you have actually seen a full-bodied apparition of a ghost. Not many, I don't think. But if you had that little book, Ghosts of the Midlands and How to Detect Them, and I've wrote several ghost books since. Another one of my books was Ghosts and Phantoms of Central England by me, Philip Solomon. 200 local hauntings. I've always said that I think the West Midlands, the Black Country, and the area that I come from has more ghosts per square inch than anywhere else. But there you go. Very, very successful. So seeing ghosts, really, it's a bit subjective, isn't it, really? But people try by using all sorts of things, meditation, exploring support, supposedly haunted locations, using equipment like EVP recorders, SLS camera apps, and trying specific techniques like, well, all sorts of ways. We've all heard of them, haven't we? You know, and we've seen them if you watch TV programs, different sort of things that they use. I think one of the most funniest ones is one where they have one of those little radios, and they call it a ghost. What do they call it? It's like a ghost machine. And really, it runs back and forward through the radio frequencies, and they stop it when something sounds like a hello or hi or yeah, what time is it? I mean, I'm being very facetious, really, but really, that's not serious ghost hunting, not really. I mean, I was very lucky that I did a lot of work with the greatest ghost hunter of them all, probably. Well, not you might be thinking of Harry Price in England, but in the UK it would be Professor Hans Holzer, and he became my great friend, and learning about real ways of investigating the paranormal rather than being silly. But I mean, I've worked for most of the organisations that put on those sort of events, and there are certainly places that you can go to. You'd have a much better chance of seeing a ghost. But like I said, really, there are different sort of methods and techniques. Meditation and psychic development. Well, if you're hoping to sort of be able to see ghosts, you probably need to learn about meditation and altered consciousness or learn to have out of body experiences. You might attune to the spirit world if you want to be serious about the work and train as a medium. Exploring haunted places, visiting historically significant or reputedly haunted locations, and researching their backgrounds can set the stage for very interesting experiences. That's true, but also you must just as much likely to see a ghost outside a council house in Birmingham, really, or something of that nature. But of course, we'll remember Claude, who used to travel on the trains, New Street, Birmingham, putting in appearances, things like that. But some of the equipment that the experts use, I've mentioned some of them already, but we'll go over them again. EVP recorders. Use a digital recorder like Zoom to ask questions and listen for responses. I've told you about what they do with those little ghost boxes, haven't I? Electronic voice phenomena that you might not hear live, but when you play it back, record it in different frequencies and you can hear things. An SLR camera, good, really, I suppose, for doing sort of that investigations. I remember one of the first pieces of equipment that we managed to get over that was very, very useful, and that was a camera, 35mm camera, but with an infrared lock on it. You could press a button, and you could use it infrared in the dark, and that was very helpful. SLS cameras, we've mentioned those. Photography using lung exposures. If you hear any large explosions when you're in a group of people, and it's set to be rather scary. The explosions you might hear might not be of the well, I'm not going to be silly and say, but sometimes people have been known to let one go, so to speak, haven't they? When they're very nervous. But, I shouldn't really be that trivial about it because it's a very serious subject to a lot of people. And, try illusions as well. I'll tell you a few of the illusions that really will help you. Stare at a small dot in an image, like those in Spectopia, if you've ever come across that, and look at a blank wall to see what happens after you've looked at it, and then you look away and look to the wall. Now, in that book that I told you about, Ghost of the Midlands and How to Detect Them. We had something similar to that, but it was a lady, and you stared at the lady for about 30 seconds, then you looked at a blank wall, and there she was. You could see her in perfect form, and many people absolutely were captivated by that. But really, there's an understanding, isn't there, what creates that, the way the human eye operates, if you like. And it's as simple as that. And it's an illusion, isn't it? But it's a very interesting one, really. And I don't know, you might be able to, some of you may still have some of my books with that lady in that you stared at, and then you looked away at a blank page. Very interesting. You could do that. Get used to seeing that, I suppose what I would be teaching you is that sometimes your eyes can see things in different ways. Something making me itch tonight. I don't know what that is. You often assign a spirit about me. Maybe it's because I'm talking about the subject in one way. You could hold a seance, I suppose, gathering sacred places. That would probably give you a better idea. Use tools like the Ouija board. People get very uptight about the Ouija board. I really don't think it should have ever been sold as a thing for kids, really, because that's what it was many years ago. I can't remember. I think the original one was Waddington's, the very famous game makers. The Ouija board is not a game. It's not a game, my dears, because you will find if you go on there, time and time again, people have felt spirit coming through and making communication with them, and not always very nice ones. Now, I have to say here and now that I've said that, you do have to understand that a spirit and a ghost are a totally different thing. A spirit is the living energy of every human being that carries on, forever and ever. And if you tap into that energy, you can sense them. That's what we do as mediums. We have them come through to us. But the problem is with Ouija boards, I will have said this to you perhaps on other occasions, those of you who have followed my work for many years, but you must always put psychic protection in place. But of course, they don't always do that, do they? They just get the Ouija board out, get all their fingers on the centre of the glass, and it can move, and it can frighten you. I'm not a very big fan of the Ouija board. I recommend people not to use it. Although I have to say, in the hands of professionals, with a professional medium and, serious paranormal investigators, can be a very useful tool to use, as long as you realise that you're more likely to get spirit energy rather than, I suppose, contact from what you might term as a ghost. I hope that makes sense. Another thing that you need to think about as well is the scientific and psychological explanations for seeing a ghost. Sleep paralysis. That's a really scary state, that is, where you're conscious but temporarily paralysed, often accompanied by having hallucinations. And that can sometimes happen if you were somewhere where you set the scene that scarily, and you read that much information, and maybe the people who are around you are taking you on the tour, that it's that well placed that you could find, you move into what they call like a sleep paralysis state. If you think about that, if you're in a castle, 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, or perhaps 2 o'clock, whatever, and you've been driving all day to get there, you're very tired. People are telling you all about the ghosts that are at that particular place. You can see what I'm saying, can't you? That could sort of create sleep paralysis. Misinterpreted sensations, I always like that one. Shadows, sounds like dripping water, misinterpreted as footsteps, or a sense of presence can be mistaken for ghosts, or spirits, I suppose, if you want to put it like that. You hear a door creak, or as I say, you hear a little noise or something. One of the people, one of the guests on an event, or one of the event organisers, wah, scream. If it isn't very long before everybody else is saying the same thing or is hearing the same sounds, and you can get very scared by it, can't you? Really important considerations Many people never see ghosts, and there's no proven reliable way to force an experience of it, really. Now, there's a lot of pictures that people have taken that are very hard to explain. We had a picture taken once. Well, I didn't take it, but another member of who were with me, we were on a ghost walk in one of the old churchyards. It's very renowned for being haunted or for having paranormal experiences. And this particular churchyard had always had a report that, that it was a place that angels could be seen. How wonderful. Well, strangely enough, one of the times that we were there, and I was doing a talk right in the middle of it, and right above me, like an explosion or a flash of light, and there could only be what you could describe as looking like an angel. There may be another answer to it. People have said to me, "It's smoke gathering, it's clouds coming down very low," but it was crystal clear that night. But they took it, it was, I was saying on the television, it's very much seen in Midland TV, and they had it on a lot over America. And if you want to go on my website, I'm sure some of you do, you'll be able to see that picture. And that's not a trick. That's not been doctored. That's not one of those silly things that people make up. It's a real picture of, well, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. It's whatever it means to you, isn't it, really? I think what you've got to remember about ghosts as well, it takes a lot of patience. Remember, you're going to go to places that are reported to have regular appearances, and nothing's going to appear or no sounds are going to happen. And you think, oh gosh, I could do without this, all this waiting all night for nothing, Or you go and pay very large amounts of money to be part of groups that go to very highly reputed, let's say that, as being haunted, and you don't see nothing at all. I think they're much better when they have a really good medium on those sort of things, because a really good medium, what seeing ghosts for us is natural part of the life that we live, really. It's much easier to see ghosts than spirits. Our spirits do come to the mediums, and we can link with them, of course. And I think you probably have a better chance, really, going on that. They call them ghost hunts, don't they? Or whatever you want to call them. You have a much better chance, really, of probably seeing a spirit energy rather than a ghost. And I think that would be a lot more wonderful. But it is a fascinating subject. I mean, if you want to look into this with a little bit more depth, a very interesting man. I've mentioned Harry Price, but if you look into his investigations of Borley Rectory, it's an old story, an old book, but he was the one who really, I think, kicked investigating and looking into ghosts right into the forefront of everybody's wanting to be part of. And I think it's strange, really, because I think almost everybody that I've ever spoken to have said, "Oh, I would really love to see a ghost. I'd love to see one over my shoulder, or over this shoulder, or that shoulder, or this shoulder." But things are not always what they appear to be, are they? But really, at the same time, I think some people just are so interested and so desperate to see something that imagination can take over. But if you get any of my books and you go to the places I've recommended, you would have a very good chance of sensing or seeing some sort of energy. I'm not going to say you're going to, see anything that is in full bodied. I mean, a lot of people speak of Hever Castle in Leeds, and they claim there that Queen Anne Boleyn walks the grounds and inside the castle areas and that with her head under her arm. Well, that's interesting, that is, because I do think that those sort of situations where really horrific things have happened can sort of imprint into the ether. Now, she wasn't executed at Hever Castle, was she? But of course, she lived most of her life there. And when Henry VIII decided that she would be beheaded, that could create the energy, wouldn't it, that would cause that sort of thing to repeat and some sort of energy to sort of present itself to be viewed by people. I wouldn't think there could be much more of a charged energy than having your head chopped off, per lass. And I've been very honoured to have what I believe the spirit of Anne Boleyn come through, not as a ghost, but as a spirit energy. And I don't think she was guilty of the things that she was accused of. But there you go. That's how things used to be. But that's what you've got to look for. I think people as well, sometimes I think you don't always realise that you've seen the ghost, the real one, but that real in appearance that you don't realise. I always remember many, many years ago when I was a little lad, my mother took me to Aston Hall in Birmingham, a very famous building, Aston Hall. And we'd gone in there, and I were looking at things in as we went inside the building, and Mum was, I suppose, 20 or 30 feet from me, talking to a lady in the chair, that was sitting there. I presume she was part of the staff. And I remember going over to my mum and saying, "It was that lady that you were talking to, Mum." And she says, "Oh, it was something to do with the building or something." She was very, very nice, very sort of knowledgeable of Aston Hall. And later on, as we were leaving the building, Mum asked about the lady who sat in that chair. And everybody says there's no one sits in that chair. It's an empty chair, just if anybody needs to have a little rest. There's no one ever sits in there who would be in the period dress of what you're talking about, or with that knowledge of Aston Hall. She said the ghost, didn't she? And that's a spirit, isn't it, really? My mum was fantastically gifted medium. My dad too, but even she was took. She'd seen what she perceived to be an ordinary living person, but that natural, that she didn't realise she had been speaking to. It's a spirit, isn't it, really? But I'll make an example of how you can have ghost experiences. People have told me time and time again who go to Dudley Zoo. And of course, you've got the nearby Black Country Museum as well. But a lot of people over many years used to say that they're at Dudley Castle now, going up towards the castle from the zoo, that they'd see a young couple dressed in 50s clothing, sort of the way the girls and guys wore, I suppose, like 50s, teddy boys and teddy girls, something like that. And they saw this young couple who just walked past them, and they were quite struck by what they were wearing, As I say, people described him as like a teddy boy and her like a teddy. And he just walked by and now looked back, and as they looked back, the couple vanished. Now, that would be an example of what the sort of thing you would experience if seeing a ghost. Because that would be something that would just happen over and over again. Who knows what created it? Maybe that couple fell in love there. Love will create that sort of energy, that sort of replay of etheric things, if you like, or sometimes great tragedies, like I mentioned Anne Boleyn, didn't I? Or, if somebody got killed somewhere and they're not too sure whether they're still in this world or need to go over to the other, that can create a situation where you might see a ghost. But my advice to you, if you want to go and go on one of those evenings, is go with a very, very good, respected company. And there are a few of them out there. I've certainly worked for most of them over the years, but a few of them are very, very serious about the work. And you'll have a very good, entertaining evening, if nothing less. When you go on one of those things, you hope to see a ghost, don't you? Or something like that. But hope for everything and be happy for what you get, is what I would say. If you can go on one that they take a medium along as well, a proper medium, not just one of the staff, a proper respected medium who've been willing to be part of their team. You've got far better chance of seeing any sort of paranormal experiences then, because us mediums link that sort of energy from the etheric world, and you're much more likely to see it. But do go out and investigate places that have an history of hauntings, you know. We've just come through Christmas, haven't we? I mean, Christmas is always a time when people seem to report strange happenings, you know. And there's a lot of love around at Christmas, isn't there? And that sort of situation will create hauntings and that sort of thing, and what have you, you know. And it's very interesting, isn't it? But what I would say to you, you know, just be sensible. If you're going to go out and, you know, you're going to go out and do investigations, make sure you go out with a group of friends who are sensible and don't act silly. As I say, if you do go to these places and you put on fake screams or you act silly, that sort of thing, or there's somebody here, you know, he's got a big stick or he's going to chase you, you know, that sort of thing, that's silly. And that's offensive. That's offensive to the spirit world, that is. Well, you've asked me about my opinions on how you could have a better chance of actually seeing a ghost. They did a survey once where they asked, I think it was 100 people, if they would like to see a ghost, not if whether they'd seen one, but they would like to see one. And you know, something like about 75% said they would like to see a ghost. And of course, they did other surveys where they asked people who had they ever seen a ghost, and I think it was down to about 35%. So there you go, something to think about. I'll see you again, same place next Thursday with more of Spiritual Times with me, Philip Solomon. And I hope you could join me, because it really wouldn't be the same without you. And if you are interested in ghosts or going on ghost hunts or things of that nature, may the force be with you. Good night and God bless. And thank you for joining me as always. Very much appreciated.